Welcome to the Autism Outreach Podcast. I had an amazing conversation today with Dr. Paul Gavoni. He is a Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author specializing in building positive and safe cultures. I learned about Dr. Gavoni's work over on LinkedIn and basically any platform where I see information about people that are talking in the field and doing presentations. He does a lot of keynote presentations and presentations at conferences, clinics, schools, you name it. He is out there disseminating the science, which, I always want to be a better speaker. I do. I'm honing that craft, I hope. And so I really look up to him. He carved out some time to talk to us today. He is a behavior scientist, educator, and leader, and has shaped human performance and organizational leadership over the span of nearly 3 decades. He has immense knowledge in the field of applied behavior analysis, and the way that he talks about it in a real world yet professional way is so very interesting. Just learning about his career path and some of the amazing work that he has done over the course of his career. He was on a school turnaround team, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. I am very excited for you to listen in to this conversation with Dr. Paul Gavoni.
You're listening to Autism Outreach Podcast, a podcast full of ready-to-use strategies to help those with autism strengthen their communication skills. Here's your host, Rose Griffin of ABA Speech, a speech therapist and board-certified behavior analyst who shares tips you can use in your next therapy session.
Welcome to the show today. I'm very excited for our guest that he carved some time out for us. He's doing lots of great stuff. I'm excited to share about it. Welcome, Dr. Paul Gavoni, to the podcast today.
Thanks, Rose. I love talking shop, so I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Oh, good. And I connected with you over on LinkedIn. Every single time I do a talk, I'm doing more in-person talks. I always say, please connect with me on LinkedIn. There's amazing BCBAs over on LinkedIn. And I've just connected with so many amazing people over there. And I love hearing how you're sharing in the field. You've written books, you do a lot of in-person presentations. And that's something I'm trying to do more of in my life. So I'm excited to hear about that too, just for my own knowledge. I'm trying to be better in that area. So for those of us that are new to who you are, can you tell us a little bit about your journey into the field, how you even got started and knew you wanted to do this?
Listen, I never thought I'd be here doing what I'm doing ever. I was a slacker. I didn't know what I wanted to do in school. I was surfing. I was a cabana boy. I was running water sports. I was lifeguarding. I was living a nice life. I'd show up in sandals and a pair of shorts, and half the time not even a shirt. So
Right.
it was nice. And I really wasn't ready to adult. But I took about 11, 12 years to get through my master's degree program, which should have taken me 5 years.
Right.
But I went into social work. I started off in education. I went into social work, and because I really value helping people. And I ended up working in some schools, and somebody came to me and said, "Hey, there's this behavior management program, and you can get paid $50 an hour if you get certified." And in my mind, it was like crisis management or something like that. So I'm like,
Yeah.
man, I'm broke. Yeah, I could use that. And when I walked in, I'm like, oh my God. Like, I think Richard Fox calls it like being a natural behavior analyst. Like, it all
Yeah.
just made sense to me. It was click, click,
Right.
click, click, click right
Yeah.
away. It was the most engaged I've ever been in education, because I just always did the minimum to get by, right? But
Right.
I want to know this stuff. I want to be number one in the class. I'm competitive, and all that stuff. But it just made a lot of sense. And it was before it was a university program. I actually went through Behavior Analysis Inc. down in Fort Lauderdale in Sunrise.
Oh,
And it was a master's level program, but it wasn't delivered by a university. It was 2 courses, and I got my BCABA, which
oh,
I sat on that, by the way, until 2014 or 15 or 16, with Dr. Jose
oh,
Martinez Diaz gave me a
yeah.
scholarship to go back, because I was just going to drop my certification, because I live in the world of OBM,
Yeah.
so I'm not billing, and I'm not doing the clinical level stuff. So, but I'm glad I went back, just to deepen my knowledge about it. And here I am. I
Oh,
see it as the science of helping, right? I love helping people.
right.
It's my mission to better help people and
Uh-huh.
help others through the science of human behavior, help people to help themselves and others through the science of human behavior.
Yeah.
That's my mission.
Oh, I love that. Natural behavior analyst. That's interesting because, I'm a speech therapist and BCBA. So when I started just general speech therapy, but always like working with autistic learners. And when I started learning about ABA, it just made sense for me, like how to put ABA and speech therapy together. And you can see some people that you supervise or you help and you're like, this person gets this and this person is really struggling. So, okay, I hadn't heard that. I really like that.
I'm gonna jump the article and the link right now for you if you want to put it in
Yeah,
your description by Richard Fox. Yeah, he talks about all this stuff, man. It's great. He talks about how we need to be translators of the covenant, and make it easy for people to understand, that's where I live at. I live in the
right,
world of making the science practical. I believe that we can solve 80% of the world's problems with 20% of the science. And I believe it because there's so many brilliant behavior analysts in this
right,
field that, man, they can get deep into the conceptual underpinnings of behavior analysis. And I'm not one of those guys, right? I
right,
take this simple application of the science,
right,
and I've been able to, help fighters become world champions, turn around failing schools that nobody's been able to do, failing organizations. And it's not me, it's the science, right? It's
right.
just, leveraging the practical application, getting people involved, et cetera, et cetera.
It's the way that you're sharing it, though. I really struggle with that too because when I became dually certified, or when I became a BCBA, I've been a BCBA for 12 years and a speech therapist over 20. But I don't do FBAs. I would never feel comfortable helping somebody who has self-injury behavior. I can help with the plan, but I'm not somebody who does that. I really focus on communication, and I think that that was really hard for me at first, but now I feel really confident in doing that. I have an online business, and you have to have some kind of level of grit and confidence, right, to have those things. But that I think it's good to say, like, this is my area, this is where I help. And I think that sharing it in a way that makes sense to a lot of people. Right now I teach an ethics class, and I have since it started at Kent State, but I talk about not using jargon, when you're in IEP meetings. And those are things that my students are going to be doing. And I know that you're sharing in different ways, maybe in presentations and different organizations that don't know much about ABA, right? But it's still super, super helpful. So my audience, some of them are speech therapists. Can you tell us what OBM means? Because that would not be a term that would be familiar
Sure. I mean,
like that.
it's just ABA as applied to groups, right? It's
Yeah.
organizational behavior management is what it stands for. And honestly, in my humble opinion, that all behavior analysts should understand organizational behavior management because when you start trying to get results through the behavior of others, which is always, right? If
Right.
we go into work with a learner, everybody's focused on the learner behavior, but in order to get sustainable change from that learner, we really need change on the behavior of the adults in that environment, right? Of
Hmm.
those students, because that's the only way we're going to be able to fade out. Almost
Right.
always, those adults are going to need to do something more or less or differently if you're going to fade out. So this is where OBM comes in because when we look at it through that perspective, the learner's behavior is a result because we know that we need to arrange the environment in a way that's going to change that behavior, right? And those
Right.
adults in the environment are the most important people to do it. So we need to
Yeah.
understand OBM as a means of getting those important results to change.
Yeah, I love that. That's really fascinating. So tell me how so you got your BC ABA, you said. So are you based down in Florida? Is that where you're based?
I am, yes.
Okay. So then how did you get into OBM? Did you work as a social worker, and then I'm just very curious into how you
Yeah,
then segued
sure, sure.
into
Yeah, I made
to
a big
OBM.
when originally went from working in like a day treatment. I was in a residential treatment program as a social worker,
Mm-hmm.
a day treatment program with like tough kids that were street kids, and I love those kids,
Yeah.
They had got caught smoking pot or something like that, and
Yeah. Right.
they had got court ordered these programs, and yeah,
Yeah.
some of them were struggling with some other stuff. And so I ended up going on to become a hired as a behavior analyst in the district once I got my certification. I know what the hell I was doing. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
because
Right.
you have a certification of any kind doesn't mean you're ready to practice. And it was like you, I
Right.
didn't how do I do an FBA? How do I do this stuff? But I
Right.
started doing these plans and first of all, they were too big, you know what I mean? They were just too
Right.
much. I didn't know. They looked pretty.
You started
Um,
first. Yeah, you're like
yeah.
page after page
Yeah, it was
after
like,
page. Yeah.
and I had to go back, make sure it was functionally blah blah blah. And I'd spent so much time on it. But what I realized was that gosh, these teachers they don't have basic systems in place in their classroom, right? So we're asking them
Right.
to do a whole bunch of things more or less or differently with this
Yeah.
plan, and they're not going to follow the plan if they're not doing the easiest things, right? But then I
Right.
noticed that wait a second, this is the issue at scale. It's not just here, it's the issue
Hmm.
at scale. So I was actually asked to go in and support a school. It was my first year in the district, and they were very well intended, but they ended up changing the bus zones. They wanted to have a community school, right? So they
Yeah.
stopped busing, and they hadn't been aware, I guess, of the research that supports the having the diversification of socioeconomic
Right.
makeup. You put a bunch of street kids, in high crime areas together, and they learn from each other,
Yeah, sure.
And so they had new teachers, and they had also two brand new administrators, and the school went from an A to an F that year. I remember walking down the hallway, there was nobody around. It was just crazy, right? Kids were
Yeah,
fighting, and I
right.
was just serving the school one day a week, but I started coming in the mornings just to be present, just like, gosh, because adults weren't
Safety.
even coming out in the morning. Yeah. And so at the end of the year, the deputy superintendent came to me and said, hey, Paulie, do you think you can help us turn the school around? I thought, hell no. What am I going to do with this mess, right? It's a mess.
Right.
And I
Right.
know they had been trained in school-wide positive behavior support, but positive behavior support and interventions
Yeah.
and through USF. And I thought University of South Florida, and it's a good program, But I thought I accepted it because, well, I didn't believe in myself. I've always believed in the science. And I went to a colleague and I said, hey, um, I kind of think they need PBS for adults, right? Because if we're going to bring out the best in students, don't we need to bring out the best in adults? And they said there is something like that. It's called organizational behavior management. And they handed me a book
Mm.
by Aubrey Daniels, which I happen to have right here next to me. I teach a course based in it,
Yeah.
and I read it and I thought, all right, this is everything I know. There's nothing different about it, right?
Right,
They're
right.
just using different language, right? And applying
Hmm.
it. I call it zooming out, right?
Hmm.
And so I did that. And I did something simple. I focused on changing the arrival time, that time when I was coming out there, right at the beginning of the
Sure.
year. Not because I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to use like behavioral momentum. I just was like, how am I going to change this whole school around? Maybe I
Right.
can change this one small part. So I'm doing something. And
Yeah.
man, it had a massive ripple effect across the whole school. Now it gave
Wow.
me belief in myself. It gave other people belief in me. It gave them belief in their self-efficacy. It gave them response efficacy, meaning they believe if they did this, it would produce an outcome. So it
Yeah.
got buy-in, right? So we just
Yeah.
started doing this stuff and it got buy-in to the science, which is the most important way to disseminate it. Help people make a difference
Yes.
with it. I ended up writing a book called Quick Wins, which was my
Yeah.
first book, and I've
Oh,
rewritten it in the
yeah.
second edition with the cost. And that set me off to writing a bunch of books about OBM and
Right.
all aspects of the world. So that's how I got involved in it.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I was going to ask about that because I see that you do a lot of talks, which I want to talk about too. But so you wrote a book, Quick Wins, using behavior science to accelerate and sustain school improvement. Okay, so there was an edition one, and then in the second edition, is
Yeah, I
it
have a second
Anika?
edition.
Okay,
Yeah, with Anika Costa. Yep, that's my
Anika
partner. Yeah,
Costa.
we do a lot of work together.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so what one of my questions was what motivated you to write the book, but it was really this experience of implementing these strategies, the science to help the school then turn around and then that obviously was motivating for you and you wanted to share, right, about
Yeah, well, I used to share
this
on LinkedIn.
experience.
That's how I got into writing books.
Yeah.
I after I got through my doctorate, I like unplugged writing. I remember in school, the only thing I really liked about school was like writing. It was my thing,
Okay. Yeah.
So I started putting out articles, and I'm like, man, I really like to see that people viewing it. I'd love to see people read my
Yes.
article. Some people would put some likes on it, and even there'd be
Mhm.
one or two comments, and it was an immediate reinforcer for me, right?
Yeah.
And of
Hmm.
course, I was disseminating the science, and I didn't realize how powerful, how this is my mission, right? To
Right.
again help people better help themselves and others through the science of human behavior, through behavior analysis. And so, I end up taking those articles. I'm like, wait, I got enough to do a book here. And I brought in another OBM guy,
Oh,
Dr. Manny Rodriguez, and we did the first one. And then I went on and brought in Nick Weatherly, and we did the original deliberate coaching, which we now have a second edition that literally just came out. And I just kept going and going and going because I love doing it.
yeah. Okay. Oh, that's amazing. Okay. Yeah. So I've seen the quick wins and that you oftentimes will. So who is the quick wins book good for? Like school, you don't have to be a school administrator, but is it more about, it's more about group kind of scaling, like
Well, so
utilizing the
so it could
science?
be used by anybody, right? It's in the
Yeah.
context of schools.
Okay.
But it's like if you're going to make any sort of change, whether it's team, right,
Hmm.
organizational change, right, you have to engage your stakeholders. And if you're asking
Right.
them to do stuff that's not going to produce, if it takes any sort of effort, it's not going to produce some sort of pretty immediate and visible valued outcome, you're going
Right.
to stall your change. So they're not going to believe in you, they're not going to believe in themselves, right? And it's just going to
Yeah.
go by the wayside. So it's a way to engage stakeholders through small, low response effort that produces visible and valued outcomes. So it's in the context of education, but the concepts. It's like organizational behavioral momentum, if you think about it that way, right?
Yeah.
That's what it becomes. So it's at the level. So that's what I mean, all of my books, I have 10 books now. They're all generalizable to anywhere because it's all the principles of human behavior. I have one called, my favorite is Positional Authority Ain't Leadership. That's all about like what real leadership is through a behavior analytic lens. I break it down to four very simple hats. I just came out with another one called Classroom Leadership. So it's the evolution of classroom management, saying
Yeah.
teachers need to be classroom leaders, but here's what real leadership is. This is the DNA of a leadership because all results require behavior, right? And we have a science of human behavior. So everything is applicable everywhere.
Okay, I love that. That's amazing. That must feel so good to, yeah, to have the book and then to be able to share about it. And I have seen that too in my own career. I go back and look at some of like I have my old binder from like my lesson plans and stuff, and you just want to be like, you're trying, right? But I was doing a podcast, I think with Dr. Stephen Eversole from BDS, and it was like,
I
yeah,
like
you
Steve.
have,
Yeah,
yeah, he's great. And it's like
good
you
dude.
have that certification, the BCBA, and like it's like. And now you're ready to go out there, right? And you just have to get started. And I think you mentioned like having a mentor or, you seem connected to others. And that is like a nice way to get started in the field because when you get started, you're just so like, yes, on paper, you can do all these things, but are you competent to,
It's like
So
getting your
like,
black belt. In black belt, people think that's the end. No, no, it's the beginning.
right.
You are now ready to
Oh,
learn. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like you are ready to now start evolving and applying your stuff, innovating and doing all that. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I think, this sets you up to, now you got to pull on some other people. That's why
Right.
I pulled people on for a lot of stuff. I'm like, to me, I see abundance and I think we can all build off each other.
Yeah.
There's always synergy. So it always seems to work for me.
Yeah, it's nice to collaborate. Wonderful. So I see you all over kind of doing a lot of different talks, which this year I got asked to do. Actually, it was somebody who connected with me on LinkedIn asked me last April I did my first keynote talk in
Well,
Greenville, South
congrats.
Carolina. Thank you so
Big
much.
honor.
It
Yes.
is a big honor. And I was really like just having the word keynote in there was like there were many tense moments of me being extremely nervous, but I was asked to do that talk last fall and I was like, okay, I do a lot of virtual trainings and with, hundreds of people and sometimes 1,000 and but to be in person is like a whole different ballgame. So I really
Mhm.
like stepped up my game, started speaking a lot more. And it's just something that I really enjoy. I feel like it's a confidence builder. I love being able to connect with people in real life, but I also, I find it challenging to get in front of groups of, hundreds of people. So I guess when did you get started on your public speaking journey? Like, how did that all start for you? You were probably doing trainings and things for staff at the school level, but how did you get started with like all the conference talks and in-person talks?
All right, so this is a great story. I tell it a lot because it's important for me. I feel like my public speaking has been my biggest accomplishment. I've done a lot of
Yeah.
things. I was a
Yeah.
former fighter, won Golden Gloves heavyweight champion. That there's a lot of fear,
Yeah.
schools, the books, and all this stuff. But I had such a massive fear of public speaking
Yeah.
that if you would have told me I have to speak in front of 10 people in 3 months, that every morning I'd wake up and I'd feel sick to my stomach.
Right.
I'd get this massive anxiety. So I'd have people because I was a district behavior analyst and I was part of a school turnaround team, and they say, "Hey, we're planning for this training." I'm like, whoa, I don't want to do this stuff. You know what I mean? I'll tell you what, I'll do the PowerPoint, I'll set up the room, I'll do the research, anything but do that. And I'd
Right.
feel immediate relief, right? And it feel good,
Yeah.
right? So I use
Uh,
the ACT matrix to teach this stuff, by the way. I like the
yes.
use of ACT matrix.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but the thing was, that's negatively reinforcing, right? Because I'm
Right.
escaping something that's aversive to me. But I was moving further and further away from my values. And I just look at values as a self-preference assessment, right? A preferred way of being and doing.
Yeah.
I started to feel guilty. And I wasn't getting
Yeah.
in touch with the things that were important to me. So I
Right.
had to be aware that when I felt this way, I behaved this way. Be aware that it's not in alignment with my values, my true values. Understanding that's happening because it's negative reinforcement, right? It's winning the battle but losing the war, winning the round but losing the fight. And
Yeah.
I had to initiate a replacement behavior, right? So
Yeah.
they would say, accept that you feel that way and commit to another behavior. Like, all right, this is just a self-functional behavior assessment, and I need to have a self-behavior intervention plan. And what am I going to need to do more, less, or differently that's going to move me towards my values? And I look at it as like it's not like the thoughts and feelings went away, but if I'm
Right.
focused on those things, I can't focus on what I need to do to be successful, right? So I had to carry
Yeah.
the proverbial monkey on my back, and I had to learn how to public speak. I had to watch videos. I had to speak
Hmm.
slowly. I originally set it up so I was with a friend of mine who I felt comfortable with, and I'd speak
Right.
for a couple minutes, and he'd speak for a couple,
Yes.
and we'd go back and forth, right? And then
Hmm.
what happened was I started getting in touch with some very positive, powerful positive reinforcement. Leading indicators like people nodding, people saying,
Right.
makes sense, smiling, laughing a little bit if I said something right, coming up
Hmm.
to me afterwards saying, that was good. Thank you so much. I'm like, it was, you know. So as I got in touch more and more with this level of positive reinforcement, right, this which are aligned with my values, those thoughts and feelings all but went away. I might get a little, I spoke in front of 4,000 people at an
Wow.
arena last year. And when they asked me,
Amazing.
are you going to speak? Like, yes, I want to. I'm going to freaking crush it because I'm so much living in my values. Everything I do, I'm living in my values. I work for Professional Crisis Management Association, right? They're the greatest, crisis management system in the world, in my
Yeah.
opinion. I could have went and worked anywhere, right? But
Right.
I disseminate information about them all the time because I want people to have the best of the best. All of my books, all of my writings, all my speech, everything I do is grounded in my values. The only thing I don't love doing is like the traveling from point A to
I
point B,
know. It's
but
hard.
everything else is just wonderful,
Taxing.
right? So I feel
Yeah.
very fortunate.
That's great. Yeah. I had a business coach that I think it was because I have three kids and in this small business ABA speech. And I was talking to him before I got asked to do the keynote, but he was like, I think you're just playing small because I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I can go to conferences because I have three kids, and I'm married and it's like a lot. But that kind of ate away at me because, and you probably felt the same way. Like I definitely thought like when I'd hear other people speaking, I thought, I don't know. I guess for me, I felt like, I can do that. Like I have stuff I want to share. So,
That's right. If
you
I
know,
can do
I
it, anybody can do it. It's just behavior.
yes, right. And so I did do a speaking like Mike Pacquione, he was like my business mentor's speaking coach. And so I did do this like mastermind workshop with him. And for me, it was like just saying I'm committing to this. When I said yes, I'll do the keynote, then I just started doing a lot more in-person talks to get ready with like how to get your slides ready and how to set up, speaker notes and the clicker and just like the logistical things. And then the other article, which you've probably read, is Dr. Pat Fryman's. He has this like 15 steps for public speaking for behavior analysts. It's a really good.
I haven't
Um,
read it now.
oh, you haven't read it? Oh,
I
it's
love Pat
really
though. I met him for the first
yeah.
time, but he was one of my initial inspirations to public speak.
Oh,
Him
he's
and
so
him
good,
and
isn't
Dr.
he?
Merrill Winston, yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
I feel
Meryl's
like
great.
I'm in between them, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah.
Yes, Meryl's great. He's been on the show. But yeah, he just says do it scared, right? Like, and I just feel like, when I'm just gonna get it here, I've prepared, I'm just gonna try my best.
Yep.
So, like, yeah, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing that because I think sometimes people will look at people who are doing a lot of different talks and they feel like, oh, this person's doing everything. Like, how do I even get started? So,
If I can do
um
it, anybody can do it. That's how I look at it. It's just behavior.
yeah, it's just behavior. I like that. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the show. I'm excited to give the Quick Wins book. I want to read that. That sounds really, really great. And I think that's really important information. I definitely will. Actually, I think I'm going to be at the same conference as you. I'm going to FABA talking about SLP,
Oh,
BCBA
cool.
ethics. I don't know if you'll
Okay.
be down there. I thought I saw that you might be down there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, sure am. Yeah, I'll be down
um,
there. Yep.
yay. So where can people
I'm a
find out?
panel.
Oh, cool. Where can people find out more about you and your work?
Well, so I actually just dropped a link in the chat
Oh,
there.
okay. Cool.
If you give them access to the link, it gives me bio, it gives up my all my podcasts, Christ in
Cool.
Education, Thoughts and Rants of Behavior, access to all my books, all sorts of stuff that's in there. So yeah, please share that with people, and I think that should work.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was great to connect.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Autism Outreach. If you enjoyed the show today, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode full of actionable strategies you can use in your therapy room. Write a review too. That would mean so much to me. I always love hearing from you. Have a specific topic that you want included on a future show? Reach out over on Instagram, ABA Speech by Rose, or visit me at www.abaspeech.org.